Ladies and gents, this is not the Big Red Barrelcast yet. Right, I'm Kev, and let's get this out of the way first. Big Red Barrelcast is on its way back. We have discussed it. Calm down.
Hooray. Oh.
Big Red Barrelcast is on its way. Actually, do you know what? Let me introduce my co-hosts first. So,
Okay.
Let's just do that first. I'm not sure what order's best. Let's just do it this way. Tim is on the phone call with me.
Yay! Hello, sir.
Mr. Tim Hibbs and Mr. Diarmuid Scannell.
Hello.
Right, so this is not the Big Red Barrelcast. That will be back soon.
I am not Canadian.
I have had the words with
I'm not
Dave.
American.
I've had the words with Dave and with Pac-Man, and we are going to figure something out soon. We've all had loads of different things going on in our lives over the past year or two, and I'm finally going to have some stability in my life soon, in as much as I'm going to stop being a student for a year. That's the most stable thing I've got going on. I don't know what you're talking about. No,
I don't think it's very stable on the sea waters, though, no? Like, kind of...
Not when I'm driving, it's certainly.
Okay, well, there you go.
Leans over to one side.
Just as someone that is obviously closely related in other areas, but is also just genuinely a fan of the show, I look forward to singing the theme tune again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be back soon. In the meantime, we're going to just use this feed to bundle out our new podcast as a couple of prototype runs at the very least, which is our VR-specific podcast, Peripheral Vision. Yeah, so that's going to be me, Tim, and Diarmuid, and we're going to talk virtual reality on a regular basis. Not a weekly basis. Not a weekly basis. Just whenever there's something. Virtual reality isn't the booming market that, shall we say, the rest of the gaming industry is at the moment. But I think there'll be enough content for us to cover. Once or twice a month, we'll pop something up and maybe do a Twitch stream every now and again as well with something interesting.
And this is partly influenced by the fact that if I keep on talking about as much VR, and I've been toning it down on how much VR I've been wanting to talk on BRB UK.
Yeah, Dan will go mental.
If I carry on talking, I may drive Dan and Coleman a little bit insane. So, yeah. So, basically, we're sectioning ourselves off on another thing, and I think it's safe to say that we are probably the three biggest fans of VR on Big Red Barrel, basically.
Also, the only people with VR headsets on Big Red Barrel.
That's probably the only other qualification we need to really talk about, actually having a headset.
Now, the one other thing that I'll kind of preface up front is the fact that we are slightly unbalanced just in our coverage of VR in general, just because myself and Diarmuid are both PSVR owners, and Mr. Kev is an Oculus owner, which I will come on to question you about in a second. But we do have someone that is planning on contributing some possibly pre-recorded bits of HTC Vive goodness.
A roaming reporter?
Yes, a roaming reporter coming in and kind of giving us some stuff. And we got a sort of funny angle that I've planned to do with that. We'll see how funny that works out. But then also just in general, this is one of those things where it's kind of the state with our podcast anyway, but we want a lot of audience interaction from this as well, basically. So, I mean, if you've got opinions and have ability to record and want to send them in, that's something that we might be asking for in the future. But in general, just make sure you're getting your opinions out to us, especially for some HTC Vive owners, so we can kind of readdress that balance a bit. So, yeah, we're calling on HTC Vive owners to kind of, give us a bit of news here and there, and we will be covering you a little bit, but please also inform us. But that also runs true for both the other headsets as well, basically.
Yeah, I think in general we want to, because VR is the hardest of all gaming related hardware to get across to an audience at the moment if that audience doesn't really have any experience with it. So in the event, so this podcast more than any other, if you have any questions for us, we'll probably field some questions 2 or 3 days in advance of every time we're going to record. Yeah. And then hopefully we can get around to answering those questions on the podcast to, as best as our ability.
Make that any question about the hardware, the software, what we like, games from the past, anything that you like.
What we're wearing right now, all that kind of good stuff.
Also, you'll see coming up in the show, this pilot itself is going to be slightly differently kind of structured to most of the podcasts we'll have going forward. But we've kind of broadly broke things down into 3 major sections: past, present, and future, basically. And you'll see how that kind of works out in future episodes. And we think that's going to be a fun thing to play around with going forward. But for now, we're going to cover a little bit of kind of more general sort of topics, kind of broad-ranging stuff than we might drill down into for later. But that's also where we'll ask for a bit more interaction, people doing their own top fives and stuff as well, and coming back to us with that. But for now, I thought it'd be a good idea. We've kind of mentioned what headsets we have, but I just thought it'd be a good idea to give a foundation of how we originally approached VR and kind of, the thoughts behind the headsets that we picked up.
Oh, we're going deep.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to drill into you, Kev. Now, Oculus was the first headset that I tried.
That sounds really ominous, by the way.
Phrasing. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed what you guys picked up on there. What?
I mean, well, if you're going to drill into me, Tim, then
at least dinner first,
do
drill
it
down
carefully.
into the subject of, not necessarily you, Kev. That's
be careful, all right?
We're good friends and all. I've known you a while, but no. But I just wanted to kind of ascertain, like, for me, Oculus was my original kind of how I originally encountered VR, basically. And on
the DK1, yeah.
Yeah, well, I originally played a DK1 at E3. I think there's a bell sounding in the distance somewhere there for that.
Everybody's drinking.
But then that was my initial thing with the Valkyrie, and then I came away, bought a DK2, but anyone that knows me through BRB in general will kind of know that I'm more of a console gamer. But I'm very curious why you took the decision to go Oculus over HTC Vive, because if I was a PC gamer, I would have been much more tempted by the Vive.
Okay, that's a fair question, and one I did ask myself when I was deciding which I was going to buy, and it came down to two things. Number one, the Oculus Rift plus Touch plus 5 games was £200 cheaper than the HTC Vive with no games.
That's a good argument right there.
Yep. So that was like number one with a bullet. Secondly, the Oculus Rift is supported by and owned by Facebook, who, despite all of the issues they're having in the news right now, are somewhat of a rather rich and stable company. HTC, on the other hand, are a mobile company, and I have a lot less faith in that lasting a long time.
Have you ever owned an HTC phone?
No.
I have. They are actually really solid phones.
I'm sure they are. Nice phones. I've never had one of them that didn't have a serious technical issue a few months into owning it, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, that's not that. I mean, it's a whole different thing with the phones. I know the Vive is a really, really good headset. I'm not disputing that in any way, shape, or form. But as I say, a couple of £100 cheaper for an Oculus, which was
that makes a difference.
I won't lie. That's like 90% of the reason I went with it. The other reason was there's a game which we'll get onto in a moment, and it was exclusively on the Oculus. So I was just like, I really want to play that game, and it's only on the Oculus. So £200 cheaper, and I get to play the exclusive I want to play. That seems like the way I'm going to go.
This is pretty much the argument that you would have for pretty much any console choice or
absolutely, yeah,
any kind of choice, really. Is it cheaper? Does it play the games I want? There you go.
Yeah, this is a conversation people would have had with themselves when the PS4 and Xbox One were launching, right?
Exactly.
It's one's cheaper than the other, and certain ones have got exclusives that the other doesn't.
But for me, I'm actually surprised that it was an exclusive that pulled you in one direction, because this is something, obviously, I'm not as close to it as you are, and I haven't examined it as closely since, both headsets came out. But I wasn't under the impression that there was a large difference between the two libraries. I thought there was an almost 100% kind of crossover. Obviously, things that Oculus have funded, you could see not coming to HTC Vive, but I thought most of the games were on both systems, no?
So there are hacks that can get around either way.
Yeah.
Which I didn't, at the time of getting into the market, I didn't really want to expose myself to that side of things.
I understand that, yeah.
Just because I want to experience it like as it's supposed to be experienced.
Yeah, exactly,
But Oculus Studios is putting so much money into so many startup developers at the moment, and HTC, on the other hand, are not. So, like, the one Vive exclusive that I can name off the top of my head is Fallout 4, right?
Okay.
Which is barely playable on Oculus. And I stress barely. It's not designed for those controllers at all.
Yeah.
But Oculus, on the other hand, has tons of Oculus Studios stuff that you can play on a Vive. But, it's always going to be Oculus first. So that was a big reason for it. Oh, and the other reason I chose Oculus, by the way, I forgot about this. Now that I'm remembering it, is the controllers. The touch controller for the Oculus I prefer it infinitely to the sort of Vive ones.
The Vive ones, they feel like a piece of kitchen equipment. Am I weird there? Like, I had a thing recently where I was playing Windlands 2 on the Oculus Rezzed. I'm unfamiliar with those pads, so I kept on reaching for the wrong buttons, and I didn't really check the button placement before I kind of put the headset on. Sort of thing. But yeah, I know what you mean about the HTC Vive ones, because there's something that just feels like they may be more accurate, they may be better, but they don't feel as nice.
Well, the Oculus ones, they fit perfectly into your hand. It's almost as if someone took a PS, and I know you guys are big fans of the PS4 controller as well, in terms of hand comfort. So the Oculus feels like the hand grips of the PS4 have just been it's been sawed in half, and now you've got one in each hand.
And we should clarify there, you mean the DualShock, because I am not a fan of the Move.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and also the fact that it's got sticks and all of the buttons are just in really comfortable positions, as if you're holding a controller, but, it's separated in two parts. Yeah. It's just the whole experience of the Oculus Touch, for me, is just way more preferable to the Vive.
Yeah, and I think that's something, if I got used to them, I think I would like them. And, well, I definitely would like them more than the Move, and I would probably like them more than the Vive controllers as well. So, yeah, I can definitely see that as an argument for why you went Oculus. Just to pull you up on one other thing you mentioned as well, because you said about Oculus investing in a lot of startups. Now, I don't 100% know this is the case, but from what I've heard from VR developers and a little bit of general kind of talk here and there, all of the VR platforms are no longer investing in startups. They will invest in something to get it over the line, and in some cases will insist on exclusivity for doing so. But generally speaking, and there might be still games that are coming that were funded by Oculus originally and, from startup, etc. But it seems to be the case that most of that has not even dried up, but completely vanished, basically. There is none of that investment revenue anymore. There is investment for seeing things to full fruition and getting them to market, but there isn't investment for starting from the ground up. And that's why you're starting to see some companies pull out of the market, and that's why you started to see a slight less increase in people entering the market as well.
Well, that kind of makes sense, though. If you think about it, with the maturity of the VR market at this stage, all of the headsets are out, and they have been out for a good period of time now. Yeah. So investing in a startup company means that you're looking at a game that probably isn't going to be out for at least 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're kind of just getting a game over the line where someone has already done the grunt work, has almost gotten the game there, and then not only can you invest in that game in the end just to get it onto your platform, but you might be able to work out some kind of exclusivity with that. Yeah. That makes a bit more sense. I mean, that doesn't exactly... Now, obviously, it's not good that people are pulling out of the market, but at the same time, at this stage, you want to start getting bigger games on the market, which means that you want the guys that are in there for the long haul.
Yeah, exactly, and that could be one of the things that could be seen as a negative, but actually could also be equally seen as a positive, as a sign that the overall VR market is maturing to a point where it can stand on its own two legs a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with the market distilling a little bit, so that to be perfectly frank, to get rid of all the excess fluff and just concentrate it down to the people who know what they're doing. That's not a bad thing.
And we're seeing stuff like Windlands 2 now, where, a developer that did prove themselves were successful in the first round, are coming back again with a sequel to a previous game and adding lots to it in terms of they're adding multiplayer and more stuff online and stuff like that, and just being able to add those kind of dimensions onto an already existing thing and take it to the next level type thing. So I think that's interesting.
So conversely to this, I assume, I'm running off an assumption here, I may be wrong, so I'll ask both of you. I assume that the PSVR decision was based on you just had the hardware and that was the easiest way to go, yeah?
Yeah, that for me it was definitely.
Yeah, I think that was 70 to 80% of my decision. With the other portion literally just being that I much prefer the PSVR headset. I find, and it's one of those things that it could be down to personal taste, it could be down to the shape of my face, yeah? But literally...
So you're referring to a comfort thing here?
Comfort, but also... The big thing for me on the Oculus is I find that there's too much of a gap beneath my eyes, to the point where I'm like, I can see the screen, and then there's this massive bit underneath where all the daylight's coming in, kind of thing.
Do you know, interestingly, I agree. But my favourite thing about that annoying little design gap at the bottom of the Oculus on the nose
It gets air in.
it gives me some ventilation so I don't constantly steam up my headset.
Which, when you're playing something like Sprint Vector,
Oh, yeah. God.
it does become a big issue. So I can understand that. And the one thing that, as much as I find the PSVR headset comfortable, when you're doing the more active games, it does become a bit of a sweatbox, and
Well,
I think that's probably the
does.
case with all of them. But I don't know if it's a bit better with the Oculus, because I haven't, like, when I was messing around with it, there weren't really the active games to play, kind of thing. I mean, like they seem to come along at a slightly later date than the seated experiences, basically. But right, so and Diarmuid, we kind of glossed over your sort of decision, but do you have a PC, like a gaming PC?
At the time when HTC Vive and Oculus Rift were sort of gaining popularity, and that's when I probably would have jumped on board, I didn't have a PC good enough to run them. Right now, I still don't really have a PC good enough to run them. I could probably get away with running an Oculus Rift on mine, but it's not the powerhouse that I would want in order to get the best experience out of it. But at the same time, when I was getting into the whole VR thing, it really was a decision of already have a PlayStation, that's half the battle. This headset's coming out. I also know that unlike Oculus and HTC, Sony are a games company. They're gonna keep making games for it, and it's their hardware. They want this to be a success,
and they made no secret of the fact that they were really putting some investment into the VR.
Yes, and that kind of put me over the edge, because I think they know what they have, and I think they know now that they have a pretty good foothold in the VR market. Which means
the fact that it's the most popular headset, basically.
And it's always going to be, because as Kev mentioned at the start, when you go when you release the cheapest option, you kind of, that's kind of the sweet spot, because now you just have to make sure that you don't show that you're the cheapest option. And I think Sony have done a pretty good job of that so far.
Well, I think graphically, a lot of the games look on par, if not sometimes better, just because of the reduced screen door effect, basically.
At least so it's what I've noticed anyway. Like, there's a lot more games out there that I've been impressed by on the PlayStation headset than I would have expected. I thought it was going to be an indie kind of a device until the audience got up to a level that it would be, viable for bigger games to come out in it. But so far, like, there's been some really gorgeous titles that I'm sure we'll talk about later on.
Yeah, and I have to say, for instance, Wipeout is
oh my god, yes,
graphically better than I thought any game on the PSVR had any right to be.
Yes.
I don't know if you've had a chance to see that yet, Kev, but
not in person. No, I know.
My word.
Obviously, from a tech spec standpoint, the PSVR sort of hobbles behind the other two.
Yeah,
but I have never been anything less than massively impressed at what developers can do with that thing to make games look as good as they do in it.
And I think it's probably I don't know exactly, because I'm not the most technically minded person, and especially not enough to start programming in VR games. But I imagine that because you've got a much more set console, and there's the two options of the Pro or not, but because there's not that many different configurations that they can have, and there's only two headsets type thing, that makes it a lot easier to sort of target for, and kind of
you can kind of design around the limitations.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
that's been the case with consoles since day one. Yeah, they give you that one target spec, and you go, okay, well, I'll make my game run as perfectly as I can on that, and I don't have to worry about someone having an ATI versus an AMD versus an NVIDIA versus an Intel.
Yeah. Cool. So, we kind of rolled into this, and that has been a bit of the past, kind of catching everyone up with exactly what systems we have and how we approached VR and all that type of stuff. But the other thing we thought would be a good idea, just to kind of get everyone up to speed on our thinkings on software-wise, was just to go through what we regard as our top 5 VR games so far, basically. So, Kev, do you want to... well, actually, no. Should we sandwich you in the middle of me and Diarmuid and chuck Diarmuid up first, basically?
Yeah, lob in the deep end.
Superb.
So we could have a bit of crossover here between all three of us, and we could have a little bit... we're more likely to have a bit of crossover between Diarmuid and I as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, yeah, so as you're probably going to guess, all of these are going to be available on PSVR because that's the headset I have. But for me, the first game out of the gate that kind of impressed me enough that I was like, I can see what they mean by presence, and that was Batman Arkham VR.
Oh, okay.
That was an experience because it was one of those cases where I put on the headset and it kind of, at the start, your mind is still sort of cynical to all this. You're kind of like, I'm still holding two move controllers. I'm still inside in this room. And it's kind of the sound design and it's everything that they do in the game with the 3D audio, with the voiceover coming directly from the Batman Arkham games that like the same voice actors.
I'm Batman.
Exactly. It just sort of like it got to the stage where there was kind of like, I was, if you've played the game, you know this already, but like you kind of have to investigate a missing person, and you kind of. I was immediately thinking, okay, what's on my belt to help me with this? So I was already looking down, picking off different things. That was the experience that kind of first got me into the idea of presence and what that actually meant.
Yes.
And yeah, that was one of the more impressive games that I played. It's
also just good childhood wish fulfillment.
Yes. Which is always going to get
Batman,
my money.
Going into the Batcave. There's my Batmobile.
There's that part when you're looking at yourself in the mirror. I think it's like as you're going into the Batcave at the start.
Yes.
And you look at yourself and you're Batman.
I've never felt more handsome.
I know, right?
Or more buff.
In all seriousness, that one scene, like you say about presence, it's that one scene that I think really gets across what the potential for VR is in terms of like things outside of games, like I've got a self-image issue. Well, now I can go in VR and I can look at myself in various different mirrors and various different guises. And it's not going to be for everyone, but I think that's a really useful utility going forward, just for the human race in general, let alone gaming.
Yeah. And I don't know if you saw, but there was a recent report that VR's being used to help with burns victims, more so to like take their mind off while they're being treated. But like you can, but again, that's taking someone out of their body and giving them the kind of different experience, as well as distracting them from something medical. And just one of those things that I think a lot of people forget about in VR in general is that there's not just gaming. There are other uses for VR which underpin why VR is going to be here from now on, basically.
It's a powerful kind of feeling. It is that powerful feeling of presence. Like when you actually do kind of lose track of the fact that you're in your living room and you're not, Now, it's not like that you're teleported into a new world or anything like that. It really is just kind of a momentary thing, but you just kind of forget, and you're just doing your task in this virtual world, and then every so often something happens, like your headset gets stuck on something or whatever,
or you hit a
pull you out of it.
Also not to plug other people's content too much, like Kind of Funny, but I have to say that Greg showing his mum the Batman VR demo is that's a really good video.
That is some good content right there. I saw that.
Showing other people VR is part of the enjoyment for VR to me as well. But hey,
absolutely, yeah.
No, we'll come back to that another time. But what's your next game on your list, Mr. David?
For me, Rigs. So when PSVR was announced, the idea I had in my head was this: you delve into it, basically what Batman VR was, which was you kind of delve into this world, you're looking around, you're liking kind of stuff. The gameplay part was almost secondary. Like, I didn't really know how that was going to work. And Rigs was the first one that kind of sold me on. You can get real speed, precision, and just kind of good fun times in a kind of a
running around as well.
Exactly, in a competitive multiplayer environment. And Rigs does such a fantastic job. Like Guerrilla Cambridge did outstanding work on that title. It's for quite some time, it was like the pinnacle of this is what a AAA VR game looks like. For me, at least. It was just so well produced.
Interestingly, I have 2 launch PSVR games on my list, and they're not the 2 that you've already mentioned. So
if one of them's that tobogganing thing, I'm going to hit you.
No, I'll come back to that. But one of them, like, if I had 6 on my list, Rigs would have been next, basically, because I love this. And the one thing I think is it was particularly enjoyable when we had a team of 3 of us playing as well, when it was you, me, and Sean playing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was great. And sticking your head out of the aeroplane when you're celebrating afterwards as well. that has to be done if anyone hasn't tried that already. But also one of the best intro sequences so far. The only other thing that I think rivals it is the Star Wars intro bit as well, basically from Battlefront. But yeah, just when you've got those massive mechs going over your head and like jumping across you and stuff, fantastic. Really enjoyable game.
I'll move on to the next one then. Farpoint. So this was one of the games that you got before me, but that was purely because I was adamant that I was going to wait until the aim controller was available separately.
And I pre-ordered mine, and good thing too, because they ran out.
Yeah, cause I'm a digital gamer, so all of the games I buy are all digital. And I was waiting for ages to get it, and I ended up not getting it. So basically what I did was I got Farpoint in the bundle, and then the other game was given to my housemate, so he has that as well. But I had the controller, so that's what I cared about. And I had the digital version of the game, and I played through it. I think I tried it initially with the controller, and I was like, God, no, not at all. And then I got the aim controller, and as the first game that really kind of sold me on the aim controller, it just works incredibly well. You do have to go into the options, and you do have to basically turn off those, what you call it, movements, the clock turn, where you kind of go.
Oh, yeah.
That is the most annoying bloody thing in the world.
I don't know why everything defaults to that. I
think it's purely because it's the
comfort setting
most
stuff,
comfortable for most people. Like, they don't feel queasy with it. But like at this stage, I've played enough that the smooth movement actually feels better.
And I find that click turning is the thing that makes me feel queasy.
I think most people, you're in a minority there, Tim.
Yeah, I know.
Most people need it to move quickly because having a head movement in-game without actually moving your head is what makes people go wonky.
Right, yeah, okay.
What I found personally, I don't mind the click movement, but if I've got the option for smooth movement there, I will put it up to like max sensitivity, so it happens really quickly.
I tend to go in and turn every comfort setting off that I can find to turn off and go, is that
start
okay?
From scratch.
Is that okay? Yeah, good. Let's go.
Oh, come at me, nausea.
Did the same with Rigs as well. Turned everything off, made the thing shoot me up in the air, everything.
We may get onto this later, I don't know, or you guys may be about to bring it up, but the one thing that I had to do with Skyrim VR when it came out on the PC recently is just like, it is putting you in a baby chair. In terms of the motion sickness setting, so I had to just go into the options and go like, no, turn that off, turn that off, turn that off.
Turn everything off. Turn it all off. Chuck it all out. But the aim controller is a piece of magic as well. Again, this is something you may not have experienced yet, Kev, but just being able to look down the sights of a gun and have that, like, be a gun that you pull up to your eyes in the game as well as the thing you're physically doing is just a really nice magic trick, and it never stops feeling good, basically.
Yeah, it's like I've been waiting for more games to come out to take advantage of it, and there have been 1 or 2 that have been good. There have been a few too many that haven't been as good.
Dick Wild.
Dick Wild is a very good implementation of it, but there's been a few bad implementations of it as well, or at least ones that don't really use it to its full potential.
The latest one to use it that I think was good was Operation Warcade, which I'll come on to a bit later as well. But hey.
I will disagree with you on that, but we will move on.
We'll come back to that in a minute. But
exactly.
Anyway, but yeah, and so what's your other game on games?
I also just wanted to shout out Robinson the Journey. Because
really? Okay.
I really enjoyed that game. It was the first, so after Batman VR, and that it was a good game, but it was quite short. Yeah. Now, Robinson the Journey isn't exactly a long game either, but it was one of the first games to kind of it sort of puts you in a completely different world. Similar to Farpoint, but this was released closer to launch, and it kind of had more of an impact on me. But you're basically, it's in the Crytek engine, so it looks gorgeous. And you're exploring this planet, and you're stranded there, and you just kind of go on this adventure. And it just, everything is so well done that like Crytek are able to make good games when they want to, and just tell good stories. A lot of the time their focus is on just making impressive visuals, but more so than in most kind of regular console games, in VR, that is actually a really good thing, because that does sell you on the world a lot more. But at that point, it also doesn't exactly negate the fact that just from a game design perspective, they did a decent job of working out the rules of VR very quickly. So there's things like the quarter turn stuff that is annoying that's there, and that's because it's an early game. But at the same time, just the way it explores and the way you kind of select things and move things around in the environment and the way you solve puzzles, environment puzzles, is just so well thought out that I thought it worked really, really well for VR.
See, that's interesting. That's one I played a bit, liked, but had issues with the click turning and stuff, and so never really went back to that much. I might have to...
I'm actually wondering, because I haven't played it since launch, because I reviewed it at the time. I haven't played it since then. I do need to go back and see if they've patched it since. I doubt it, because I think Crytek have some other issues in their
That's one thing I forgot to mention when you were talking about Batman as well, that's had a pro patch, and I've been meaning to go back and have a little explore since that's had an update for the pro to see just like...
And like that looked good on the regular one.
But yeah,
so
exactly. I'd like to see if that looks even better, that'd be great.
Yeah, exactly.
I've lost track. Was that 4 or 5?
That was 4. Just to the last one that I wanted to mention, and purely, it wasn't so much like best experience, but I wanted to try and make each of these games kind of a slightly different experience within VR. And this is the first multiplayer game, and don't keep shouting at me, Riggs. Multiplayer game I wanted to mention, because this is a couch co-op multiplayer game. Which is one of the selling points of the PlayStation VR over the other ones, because of the fact that you still have if you're sitting in your living room and you have your PlayStation plugged in and you have your VR headset on, there's a TV there sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah, with the social screen output, as they call it.
That's what they're calling it. And that some games have used that. And one of the games that I think has done an impressive job with that is Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes.
Okay, cool. Right,
I loved that game. It's one of the best party games I can think of. That you've seen the ads for PlayStation VR where you've a bunch of people sitting around and you've one person in the headset. That seems like the worst Switch/Karen, kind of ad ever. But this is the game that actually does that right. What you have is, if you're not aware of the game, you're in the headset, you're in another room. You can hear the people beside you on the couch. You're in a room with a bomb, but you've no idea how to dispose of it, how to do anything with the bomb. Whereas the people in the room don't see the bomb, they don't see what you're seeing, so you have to tell them what you're seeing. On the screen they have instructions on how to defuse it, but they're incredibly confusing. So you have this kind of the game is all based around communication, so it's like a step outside of the game. It's not like direct gameplay is in the game. It's outside. It's you talking to someone on the couch next to you or whatever. Yeah. And it's just fun. It's incredibly fun when you're screaming at each other, trying to tell someone, no, this is a circular thing with a round. It's like it's one of the most fun experiences I've had in VR. Definitely,
it's really good. The one thing I'll say is I still found it valuable to print the manual out and not just rely on the on-screen version.
Yeah, but it's definitely, and what we ended up doing when we had a few people playing, when it wasn't just like myself and my housemate, we had a few people on the couch. Everyone would have it on their phones. So you can go onto the website and download the PDF, and everyone could scroll quickly through their phones because they're obviously more used to using that. And that way everyone would just, again, start arguing and shouting and roaring.
You guys have obviously played this probably as much as I have. I just want to give you a quick instance of the difference between the PlayStation version and the Steam version of this. Is on Steam you have access to the Steam Workshop mod community as well. So... you know how one thing that we found quite fun is how every bomb that spawns has like, I don't know, 5 or 6 modules that you got to solve in order to disarm it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's mods on Steam. There are loads of mods that just like give you new modules that have been completely reinvented by people and they've written their own PDFs for them. So that's interesting in and of itself. But my favourite by far is the one that gives you a bomb that is 100 by 100 by 100 big. So it's like you've got to rotate an entire room in front of you to get to each module.
Does it give you like 2 hours in the timer or what?
Yeah, totally. The timer is actually massive on it. It's if you haven't got like an hour or 2 to kill playing that game and you really want to stress yourselves out, the arguments that will come out of that are so much more intense.
Oh my goodness.
Because it'll be like, oh, I've got like
an hour and a half in.
It'll be like, I've got the memory module, and they're like, all right, which memory? What's the things on it? It's like, hold on a minute, I've got 70 memory modules. I'm gonna have to pick one and go one at a time.
Oh, that is ridiculous. Cool. Right. Well, cool. We better carry on motoring through. So, Kev, what's your list of 5 top PSVR? Well, no, sorry, 5 top VR games.
Yes, obviously all on Oculus.
Yes.
But although I think definitely one, possibly a couple of these are available on PSVR and certainly on HTC Vive as well. So, number 1 with a bullet, this is my absolute favourite VR game that I've played to this point, is Lone Echo.
Now is that the one that you particularly bought your headset for?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. I can understand this then. That's supposed to be great.
This was the leaner. It's made by Ready at Dawn Studios, which previously made, oh god, what was that steampunky game on PlayStation?
The Order 1886.
Yes.
That's the one. So they previously made that, and then on the tail of that one's massive success that we all know about, they decided to make a VR game.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think anyone said it was a bad game. It was just 4 hours long. Yeah, so they went on and made Lone Echo, which is the most visually stunning experience I think I've ever had in my entire. There's a moment in it when, because for those who don't know, you're on a space station. You play a robot. And it's just you and this one lady whose job is to sort of, she's the head of the space station. She's on it on her own. She's been told, like, oh, I'm going to ship back to Earth soon, so I'm going to have to leave you here on your own. So there's a lot of sort of interaction between you and the lady as to like the nature of your relationship there, and just like how one of you is going to miss the other. And the whole time you're like, oh, I'm going to be fine. I'm a robot. And she's like, I'm going to miss you though, Jack. Like, it's really like, it was the VR game that taught me I might actually be really interested in like emotional interactions between characters in VR, which I'm not typically interested in games.
Yeah, because it's much more engaging, though, isn't it?
Absolutely, when you got this lady talking to you. Interestingly, I've known slight segue. I've known a lot of people who also played this game, and it became very obvious very quickly in talking to them that they actually understood that a lot of people in VR are creeps. So apparently, if the first thing you do is reach out and try and grab her boobies, she's like, "What are you doing?" they recorded a voice line because they know how many people are going to try and do that.
Oh, that's quite funny.
But yeah, there's a moment at the start of that where the front of the space station, the blast shields open up, and you just see the rings of Saturn that you're orbiting, and the asteroid field or the ice field, and Saturn itself, and then the sun off in the distance, and you can like turn your head over, and the like on-screen UI will indicate where the Earth is, and it'll just show you this little speck, and it's just like, for someone like me who's an absolute like astrophysics space nerd, it was the most mind-blowing experience I've ever had.
Carl Sagan, Pale Blue Dot comes to mind.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've been meaning to mention this in like on Twitter or something at some stage, but a lot of people talk about being geeky because they like Star Wars. Yeah, the geekiest thing I like about Stars is The Sky at Night. That's my geekiest program. I love that. It's one of the few programs that I'll watch more than once when it comes out. Basically, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But anyway, yeah. So yeah, you're definitely floating my boat with those kind of things as well. And yeah, that's one game I'm gutted that sounds like it'll never come to PSVR. Basically.
It's the way I'll explain why it won't come to PSVR, and that's until PSVR has a better motion tracking system.
Yeah, there's no point.
So Lone Echo's entire movement is based on you're in 0G, you're literally floating around, and you can grab any surface by reaching out and using the grab button on the controller, and then you pull yourself in that direction. It gives you precisely how much momentum you put into the pull. So it's monitoring like all three axes at any given time and how much momentum you're putting through, and then you go at that speed. And because you're in space in a vacuum, well, not in a vacuum, but you're in 0G, then that momentum stays until you grab hold of something else. And it's just the best. And what they did after this, I haven't played much of it, but they've created something called Echo Arena, which is a multiplayer mode. And it's essentially like, I don't know, space football. But the whole thing is, yeah, exactly. That's actually a better comparison. But yeah, the whole thing is that you're in 0G, and now you've got a disc that you've got to throw into a goal. So it's the same motion, like locomotion system, but obviously in a multiplayer thing. And they're releasing something else soon called Echo Combat, which, as I understand, is some sort of fighting multiplayer game as well. But the single-player Lone Echo is absolutely worth the price I paid for the Oculus Rift headset, as far as I'm concerned.
And isn't that something where they found something that they liked enough that they just span it off into another game and stuff, basically? It wasn't an intentional thing that they did that with, I think, or something, basically.
I'm not sure of the origin story of it, but yeah, it's fantastic, and I suddenly developed a hell of a lot more respect for that studio, because they've always got Ready at Dawn have always kind of been Sony's sort of workhorse, haven't they? They're not exactly the people that they put out in front.
No. Well, at least when they were still kind of in a relationship with them, they were kind of given the thankless job of trying to move God of War to the PSP, and they did an outstanding job with that twice.
That's right. Yeah.
And then they were given the keys to their own kingdom and said, "Here, go and make a new IP." And I think they spent a bit too long on the new technology before they were like, "Ooh, a game! We need a game, guys." And then we all know what happened then.
So So Kev, what's next on your list then?
So next up is the game that I think most people get sold on VR first and foremost with, which is Superhot VR.
Okay. Yep. Well, look, this is where we can start crossing things off my list as well, because this is very high on my list. I think it's my second favourite game, I'd say, basically,
it's
on the PSVR.
Greatest example in VR that I've personally come across of, as we were talking about earlier, that sense of like real space presence, where...
For me, it's not so much that. It's more the fact that it's massive player empowerment. You feel like a Matrix god, basically.
You feel like you're a superhero in it at all times, obviously.
Neo.
But it's the way that you can... And I assume it works the same way on PSVR as it does on Oculus, but like there are things in the environment that you can sort of step behind and duck down, and now you're hiding behind them, which is just like... It sounds really stupid when I say that. Like, there's a video game and there's a box over there, and I can walk over to it and duck behind it. And people, well, yeah, obviously you can. But when you're doing it yourself,
when you're actually physically ducking,
it's something on a whole other level.
The one thing I find with Superhot, as much as I love it, and it's still worth buying, and it's still good, and it's a definite different experience in VR. But the one thing I find is it's an active game that shows up some of the limitations of the hardware on PSVR. Yeah. Like, especially because, and you might not have experienced this, but there's a little black box that dangles, and this might be less of a problem with the new headsets, actually, but there's in the original PSVR headsets, there's a little black box that dangles on the cord. That's where you actually plug the headset in, and then you plug that into the breakout box, basically. And if you hit that little black box at any time, you get a second where you lose vision, like it all goes black. And that is jarring, to say the least, when you're in VR. Anytime it goes to black is not a good time in VR. But then also, like, when it's a really active game, when you're having to respond to something in half a second, losing a second of vision is disastrous.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's one of the things I'm a bit like, but like, it's still worth playing because it's such a fantastic game. But I guess you haven't had any technical problems with it, and it's a bit better at reading stuff that you're trying to grab behind you and stuff.
Runs like butter on the PC. It's incredible.
Yeah, as I said, still probably my second favourite game, still really good. And I haven't shown this to anyone else that didn't come away with a massive smile on my face. I had friends like text me the next day and go, "What was that awesome Matrix game we were playing yesterday?" I wholeheartely recommend, and I can fully understand why that's on your list. Basically.
I'll tell you when the smiles. Everyone I've shown it to, the smile always hits their face like at the exact same moment. Like they're really impressed up until then, but the biggest grin always occurs on that level where you first get a ninja star.
Yep.
It's so good. My third game is The Mage's Tale.
Okay.
Is so you remember games of the like Eye of the Beholder on the Amiga? Legend of Grimrock would be a more recent one, which came out on PC. Okay. Basically, a dungeon crawler where you're walking around, sort of a grid-based dungeon.
Do love your dungeon crawlers?
Absolutely. This game is. I mean, without the license involved, it is a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. And I absolutely love it. So you're a mage, you can get spells, you can go back to your little cauldron at any time in your home base, and you can sort of mix different elements into that spell by grabbing potions off the wall. So it'd be like, oh, this is the homing potion, so you can make everything homing. This is the fire one, so you're making it with the fire element. Over here, you've got like a choice between arc, so it's going between different enemies, or enlarge, so it's just going to be a massive ball, and that goes into the potion, and you make it up, and you equip that spell into your slots, and then you're just lobbing that spell at enemies. It's incredible fun. As you're going around the dungeon, you're also picking up like melee weapons if you want to go that way, which no one does. Yeah. You're drinking potions all the time. You got this little cheesy dude who follows you around trying to tell you what to do, and you're like, "Sod off, mate! I'm gonna have a fun dungeon on my own." It's just a really, really fun dungeon crawler. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It is challenging, especially towards the end, but that's a good thing. It really does. I think one thing VR has done really well, or two things VR has done really well so far for me. A, it's absolutely nailed the archery fantasy.
Yes, archery's really good.
B, it's nailed the spell slinging magic art fantasy.
Yeah, that's always good. That works really well in Skyrim as well. Yeah,
I haven't got this game listed as my top 5, but Insomniac made a PvP game called The Unspoken. Which is just everything is like gesture magic. So you've got to memorize these gestures using your touch controllers to cast certain spells at certain times.
Okay. That's quite cool.
It ends up playing like a rock, paper, scissors thing. It's really fun. So for spell slinging, though, and just for a straight up single player dungeon crawl, The Mage's Tale is just fantastic.
Okay, because that's not out on PlayStation. There is a dungeon crawl that's come out recently, Preta Vendetta Rising, that's been getting a bit of buzz and people saying good things about it. Bit just like it's Diablo type esque game, just in VR basically. But I can definitely see why you were drawn to that one, knowing your gaming likes, Mr. Kev.
Yeah. So the next one on my list is From Other Suns, which is a game that I imagine not a lot of people have heard of.
No, I haven't.
But here's what From Other Suns is as an elevator pitch. Now, you know FTL.
Yes.
I assume you've both played a lot of FTL, enough to know what that game is inside and out.
No, I've played a little bit of it.
Okay, so
no, it's a PC game, really. No, I think it came across another thing, but it's a predominantly PC game. I think FTL. No, like it may be on other platforms,
it's
but
on mobile as well. Yeah,
but PC.
It also found a really popular home on iPad, but I don't know if you guys are.
But then I don't have an iPad, and I think it'd be a bit too. My phone would be a bit too small to play on it. So.
Yeah, I don't even know if you can download it on phones, actually, now that I'm thinking. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So From Other Suns is a game where you're a space pirate. Well, you don't have to be a space pirate. You're a guy on a spaceship. And you can always see which way I went better.
Do you just always end up being a space pirate, whether you want it to be or whether it's in the game or not, Kev?
Yeah,
if you're in space, you are a space pirate.
Somehow it always happens. It's not my fault. So it's a co-op game as well. So you can play it single player, but you can have up to 3 of your friends with you. And you've got this spaceship that you walk around on, and each area of the spaceship, you've got several different rooms, and they've all got certain systems. So you've got a room for the weapon system, a room for the engine system, a navigation room, a first aid room, etc. And the idea is your crew is responsible, as long as you've got one person in that room operating those machines at any given time, then those machines are all at peak capacity, and you kind of have to balance the energy use between what you want to use and what you don't want to use. So if you want to jump further in FTL, then you have to get a person in the engine room to make sure they're in there, etc. So But that's not all. As you go from star system to star system, and this is a roguelike, so it's a game that you restart and then go on a run. So every star system you go to, a random encounter will occur, and it could be someone saying, "Oh, I've got a shop. Do you want to trade?" Or it could be a bunch of space pirates trying to raid a ship, like they teleport over and they're trying to take over. Or it could be someone saying, and this is what it is most of the time, "Oh, we really need some help. We've got pirates attacking us. Can you come? Here's our teleportation codes. Can you come over and help us out? Because we're useless, apparently." And so there are loads of different situations you get yourself into. So in a single player, you're kind of restricted. Your job is in that situation is going to be, right, I go to my teleporter, I teleport across, I work my way through their ship, killing people. On the way, I get a ton of color-coded loot, a la Diablo or Borderlands. Each gun it's random. Like Borderlands, the guns are all randomly generated, so they all do different effects at any given time. And you're working your way, killing the pirates, gathering all the resources you can, stealing as much as you can. And I didn't make the game, right? But you can steal as much as you want from the people that you're trying to help. And then once you win, then they give you some reward and you go back and you go on your merry way. Now, if you've got 4 players in the thing, then you can also have someone stay in your ship and monitor any pirate activity trying to come into your ship to attack you. Or you could have them on the weapon system, so they're slowly. You'll be like, "Oh, I need to attack someone in the engine room," and they're like, "All right, well, if I target the engine room, then that will shut the engines down, and it'll make someone have a bad day." So it's really cool. So you can back and forth like that. So the co-op thing in there is really, really excellent. And also friendly fire is also on, which is a never-ending source of fun.
Can cause arguments.
Yeah, so it's a roguelike where if you were playing FTL rather than playing it from a strategic view, you are literally in first person the whole time. And it's really fun. I can't say enough good things about that game. And finally, this isn't a game, but it's Google Earth VR, which is that on PlayStation?
No. I'm deeply regretful of that not being the case, basically. This is again, a big reason to have because I think it's on HTC Vive, no?
It is, yeah.
So, and this is a big reason to have a PC kind of VR setup, basically.
It's just, Google Earth has always been somewhat of a technological marvel anyway. At some point, we all just went, "Man, that's amazing." And then a week later, we were all like, "Oh, whatever, I can have a look at the Sphinx if I want to from Street View." But being able to actually go there and go into Street View in VR and look around, it's like being caught in a photograph, because you see all these people around you that are just still in time. And that's a bit creepy at times, but also
you feel
it's
like
amazing.
a time traveller.
Absolutely, it's incredible. And you can go and stand at the top of the Empire State Building and have a look at the view off of there, as if while you're in VR. And the other really cool thing is when you're not in Street View and you're in sort of the overarching map, you can just fly. You can literally put your hands out in front of you and you can fly wherever you want. So, of course, the first thing I did was go to my house and then I just flew to work. And I was like, "This is great. Imagine if I could do this in real life."
Now I know the route.
That sounds quite cool.
That's really cool.
Right, so, if you're done with that, Kev, I will come back and go through mine. Now, I'm going to try and get through these fairly quickly because we are running a bit long. And... yeah, me saying that will make some people laugh, but still. So you already mentioned Superhot, Kev. I'm a bit surprised you didn't mention one of the other games I have on my list. Now, I have to preface this with, I haven't played as much as this as I think this deserves, but when I'm talking about the best quality games on the system, I think Sprint Vector gets into the conversation for me.
Okay.
Now, I will preface this slightly with there's 2 things I set aside from my list because I think we can put them on other lists, and I had to choose between things to kind of narrow it down. So I kind of kicked out Wipeout VR and Skyrim off my list just because we could put those in 5 top conversions, possibly. But yeah, I just found Sprint Vector to be a really interesting application of quick, rapid movement in VR and doing a really good job of not making people ill, basically.
It depends whether you get ill from exercise.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
There is that. It's definitely a very physical game and really kind of interesting from that front. I could also have chosen Knockout League in this category as well. I wanted kind of one of the, more active games aside from Super Hot VR in my list, kind of. But yeah, and I could have gone in between the two. I would have thought you had Sprint Vector in your list just because of how much you were enjoying it when it came out.
I enjoy. Like, at some point, I've only got 5 spaces. Is number one.
Yes, yeah.
Number 2, I've never been able to play Sprint Vector for more than one race at a time.
I've played 2 or 3, and then my headset generally gets a bit too sweaty.
We should say, for those who don't know, Sprint Vector is again, the elevator pitch would be like Jet Set Radio meets Mario Kart.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the fact that they managed to do that in a way that makes sense. Like, there's a hard learning curve to the game. That's why I would say that's one of the reasons I haven't picked it up as much. I also got the game when I was ill, as in like flu type stuff. And as anyone knows, VR and flu do not go well hand in hand. Like, sneezing while trying to run is not a good look, basically. But yeah. As I said, I could have had other games in there that I've personally enjoyed more. But if I'm talking about the 5 best quality games that I'd kind of recommend to someone picking up the headset, I definitely mentioned Sprint Vector in that conversation, basically. I also mentioned before that there would be 2 launch games that I had that were different to Diarmuid's, and I could have easily picked Riggs. The one reason that I ruled it out in the end is because I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to people picking up now, because it's even harder to get a online multiplayer game of that these days. And the studio hasn't supported it as much as one of the reasons, but also just, there's not that many people playing it anymore. And I think that game is at its best when it's played with 3-on-3 human players, basically.
Well, just to give them some defense, the reason the studio hasn't supported it is the studio doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, exactly. I know. I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying that's a fact.
Somewhat reasonable.
But for me, the first game that made me a believer in VR, the first thing that I played, and originally played on Oculus, and then one of the first games I wanted to pick up when I got the headset, I think I got a review code for it happily, but was Valkyrie. Like, for me, that's, if I look, looking back on the early days of VR in 50 years' time, Valkyrie is the one game that will stand out for me. I originally played it when it was EVR, and as I said, that made me a believer in VR. Like, going and seeing that game, I was just like, oh, right, that's the future of video games for me. Okay, fine, brilliant. Like, bring it on. And just the fact that I literally, like, I'm about to say I couldn't play another dogfighting game. I am playing another dogfighting game at the moment on my Switch, Rogue Aces, which is incidentally brilliant. But that's a very different dogfighting game. But I seriously, like, from the kind of third or first person view, I do not think I could play another dogfighting game unless I was playing it in VR these days. Because for me, there's so much this adds to the experience that would be taken away without it, basically.
Elite Dangerous is a absolutely prime example of that on PC.
Yeah, and I can't understand why that hasn't had VR support yet on PSVR, basically. I'm guessing there must be graphical issues or something with that.
I couldn't tell you. There's no reason why not. I mean, it's not a touch game or anything. It's a controller that you're using with it. So
yeah,
that makes no sense.
That should be good. And like, I like Valkyrie so much that I don't even play it that much, and I don't play it that much online because I'm not, as you know, I'm not the biggest competitive multiplayer shooter type thing. But I just really enjoy the base gameplay, jumping in, playing the survival stuff, to the point where I feel I could recommend that over and above Riggs, because you can still get enough enjoyment from the single player content on that. It's still not that there isn't a lot of single player content in Riggs, but just, yeah, I think Valkyrie's just got like a little bit more that. You mentioned the sense of presence and stuff, but sitting in that cockpit for the first time and looking around, and then the whole Battlestar Galactica being shot out of the kind of, the mothership type thing, gets me every time. Like, every time I love it. Like, there's not a time when that's a bad thing. And the other one that I did was actually Until Dawn Rush of Blood. Now, for me, this is one that I didn't actually pick up with the initial lot of games that I picked up with my headset, and I played the game on the demo disc and went, give me that. Give me that game. I'm buying that today. Now. That was because I didn't appreciate going into VR that this would be the rebirth of light gun games. And I don't understand why people like Sega aren't putting every light gun game in existence and converting it to PSVR, giving it aim support possibly where necessary. Like, I would love House of the Dead Overkill. There's loads of other light gun games that I think would be brilliant to be ported across to VR. And Rush of Blood was the one that made me go, right, this is brilliant. And that's why I'm so disappointed with the recent releases from Supermassive as well, because I thought they were going to, double down on what they'd learned from this and kind of really come to, really bring interesting stuff to the fray with Impatient and Bravo Team. And they seem to have really shat the bed on that one. But hey, but yeah, Rush of Blood, fantastic. Just the fact that it's a kind of shooting light gun game and you're on a roller coaster. And then it's got the references to Until Dawn, which was a game I absolutely loved. It was my game of the year for that year. And I'm not even a massive horror fan game. I just really like the kind of technical side of that game. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just having a few references to that was nice. But the actual just fun gameplay. And from the initial games that I showed my friends, this was the one from the launch lineup where everyone gravitated towards this sort of thing from my sort of slightly more casual gamer friends that I was showing the headset to. They were all like, oh yeah, that Rush of Blood game, the shooting game, yeah, that's the one kind of thing. But the one game that I haven't mentioned so far is my standout favorite game of PSVR, and so far is the game that I think delivers on the promise and kind of elevates expectations for me for future, particular storytelling games, but also puzzle platforming. And that is Moss. Moss, I was really looking forward to and really, really did not disappoint. Like, anyone that doesn't know, you're kind of interacting with Quill, who's a little mouse, who kind of you go on this kind of storybook adventure with, and the original presentation, you're in this kind of grand hall with a kind of ye old storybook that you're flipping through the pages, and it's kind of beautifully animated kind of artwork on those pages that kind of help tell you the story, and then you'll flick another page and it kind of all magically light up and you kind of get sucked into the book kind of idea. And you are the reader that's interacting with Quill the mouse, and it's the really intelligent levels of interaction between you as a kind of this sort of larger presence in the world that I think only the mouse can really see from other characters in the world, but then. But yeah, you're interacting with this mouse and the back and forth, and to the point where there are environmental puzzles you need to solve by you're pausing a water wheel so the mouse can jump on it, and then moving and letting the wheel move a bit so it can jump off on a higher platform, or you're in combat. You can actually heal Quill by just sort of touching her and kind of holding on to her for a second, and then it will heal her. But then you can also pull enemies away from her, and you can stun the enemies so that she can get in with her sword and all this type of stuff. And yeah, it's one of those things where they I think they announced shortly beforehand, but you come to a point in the game and it's and this is the end of book 1, and I'm like, oh, thank God, there's a book 2 coming for this. Thank you. Take all my money. Just
from an outside perspective, that game definitely did well enough that they absolutely should be putting a second one out.
Yeah, and as I said, it was one that I was looking forward to, having played the demo in a while in advance. I think originally EGX, and then it came out on the demo disc. But for me, that delivered in spades, basically. I can't recommend it highly enough. And yeah, as I said, just in storytelling, graphically, it's probably not quite the best game on PSVR. As I said, Wipeout might be the one holding that title now. But for me, yeah, it's one of the ones that it delivers on the promise of VR, and until you play it and play through it, you can't really appreciate how that game would not work outside of VR, or work as well, at least, basically.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my 5. So I think we've all had 5. Now, just so everyone knows, this is about the time we were planning on ending the show And we've got through about a third of the things that we'd planned. So we're just going to speed things up just to get through the end of things a little bit. And I suggest rather, we were going to do a top 5 of each, and this has obviously taken us far too long. So I think we'll just do possibly one game that we're currently playing at the moment and one game that we're looking forward to coming up, if that suits you, gentlemen.
Sounds fine to me, yeah.
Yep.
My currently playing won't be a very lengthy discussion because you guys would have got to it months ago. But Skyrim VR is the VR game that's taking up my time at the moment.
And that's just come out. And again, that could have been on my list of top 5 games. It's an easy recommendation to anyone that's played it because a lot of people say, oh, we need more big games in VR. And I've always kind of disputed that fact until I got to Skyrim VR. And I was like, okay, no, I see the need for it. And also beautifully adapted for VR in terms of like UI redesign and stuff like that.
I wouldn't agree with that. I don't like how all of the UI screens are just flat things that appear in front of you. You still have to navigate them with sticks and buttons. I'm only speaking for PC, obviously. I don't know what it is on the PlayStation. The other thing I don't like is, oh God, what was I going to say? The UI, the menus. Oh, so you've got the whole touch. No, the movement option's fine because they give you a lot of different options for that.
Okay.
Right.
Actually, I think on PlayStation you could only teleport, right?
No, they did put in.
They did patch it in afterwards.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, so it's the fact that you've got these touch controllers, and virtually every other game that you play on the Oculus and Vive, at least, is one of those games like, I don't know, Job Simulator-esque, where you can reach in and grab an item, and then you're using that item and lobbing it somewhere. You can't do that in Skyrim. It's all like you point at something, you press the pickup button, it goes into your inventory just magically. And
but I think that's a limitation of what they'd already designed.
It's because it's a port of a 2D game. And what Skyrim VR is doing for me so far is it's saying, look, you love this game anyway. You can play it in VR now, which gives it an extra bit of immersion, and that's great. It's never going to be the top of your list because it wasn't built for VR. But if this is what they can do with a port, then I can't wait for a AAA studio to do something like this as a
Designed
pure VR.
From the ground up,
designed from the ground up to be VR.
But I don't know. I saw Skyrim VR in preview, and I was really worried about it because you'd. Basically, in the preview build that I played, you'd literally walk up to a rock and go, "What's wrong with that rock? Why doesn't that rock
why is it ill?
Like it? Yeah, why is that rock on a one flat 2D plane? But yeah, I can see that 2D plane from various different angles, kind of thing." It was like, that's really weird. It's breaking my brain. But it was one of those things where I don't know what they did to fix that. But they fixed that in the final release, basically. And the type of the stuff that I talked about with the UI, they redesigned the map, so the map worked a bit differently.
Yes. The map works really well, actually.
But also just the whole compass thing and everything like that. Like, I can't remember if you look down or up, and I think you might be able to move it from one to the other. But you can literally look down or up, and the compass is there the whole time, kind of thing. And just, the way they adapted that user interface, I thought was just really well done. Like, and to the point where I was like, okay, you've taken a bit of time and done that side of things, and you've solved a few problems that you obviously had along the way, but that made me a believer in seeing other ports come across as well. Yeah.
Quickly, I will say, like, my favourite thing that I've discovered with that game is when I play Skyrim, I love to play a stealth archer, like a ninja archer.
Right, yep.
So it requires a lot of sneaking. Now, in this game, you have you can do it with a button if you want, but it's way more fun to be standing up if you want to be standing up, and then you crouch down if you want to sneak. Now, this really takes a toll on your legs if you're deep into stealth like I am, right? So what I quickly realised is that the sneak actually, it triggers when you drop by about, I don't know, 2 feet. So now what I do is I stand up, and I've literally just put my office chair in the middle of the room. So whenever I go into a dungeon and I need to sneak, I just sit down in my chair.
Nice. That is good. Yeah, and I can entirely see why you're playing that now. It's not quite on my being played now list type thing, but it's one that I definitely need to go back to and spend a bit more time in because I really enjoyed the time that I spent so far, basically. I think I got further in the VR version than I got in the original game.
I'm nowhere near that. It's also made me want to play Fallout 4 VR, but unfortunately that's still not an Oculus capable game. The patches have come a long way, but still not made for it. And I'll quickly do my anticipated game.
Yep.
It's the latest game coming from Twisted Pixel, makers of Splosion Man and such other greats. And it's called Defector, which is a action spy movie fantasy thing. Okay. They're literally going around advertising it as, imagine if you were in the Fast and the Furious. So you're jumping out of airplanes into other airplanes and
absolute carnage. Yeah, that sounds good. And Mr. Diarmuid, what you're playing now and what you're looking forward to?
Okay, so playing now is literally playing now, as in I only kind of started it in the last day or so, and that's purely because we've had EGX recently and God of War, which I needed to knock on the head before I could move on with anything else in my life.
That is fair
including
enough.
Eating. So seeing as I've rolled credits on that now, I can now devote more time to this, and that is a game called Time Carnage. From Wales Interactive. It was released on the 10th of April on PlayStation VR. It's on Oculus as well. It's also on HTC. You talked about it briefly on the BRB UK podcast. Yeah. And again, I've just basically done the first level just to sort of see it. And it is a shooting gallery game that is compatible with multiple controllers types and all that kind of stuff. I haven't really gone into that too much, but it kind of reminded me of the H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, where you're kind of transported around in this time bubble. And the first level is kind of set in the future. You're kind of fighting all these waves coming at you. And I need to say that I accepted the review code for this before actually looking into the game, because if I had looked into the game, I would have seen that it looks a little bit scary and I would have said no.
It's not scary.
It's not that scary, but there's stuff coming at you. If there's stuff, it could be bloody teddy bears coming at you. If they're coming at you, it's bloody scary.
To be fair, once you get through that future thing, the next zone is all dinosaurs, so you're okay.
Oh yeah, that's better.
You're all good. And I have to say, the weapons that unlock in that game get good as well. There's something I really like about the simplicity of the setup as well. It's quite a low price game. I think it was £12-13 on PSVR.
I'm just looking now. It's £12 on Steam at the moment.
Yeah, there you go. So and basically, and I think it was even discounted before that as well. But yeah, basically you're in that time bubble, as you said, and you've just got 4 kind of pods next to you that can display that kind of house different guns. And all you do, once you're out of ammo, you put it back on that thing and pick up another gun, and it starts refilling the ammo. And different guns have different kind of ammo refill rates. Yeah. And that just works really nicely. There's something that I just really appreciated about that kind of balance and stuff like that. There's some things that aren't perfect with the game. I would say that the enemies are a little bit... They feel a little bit one-dimensional in terms of their character models and stuff, basically. And the weaponry feels okay, but the actual look of the bullets that are coming out of them, they look more like you're firing rice than bullets type of thing for some reason. But as I said, just in terms of a fun, easy to play wave shooter, I've been really enjoying that actually, and again want to go back.
I do need to give more time to it and get through that game.
Time carnage, see, time
puns. So I do need to do that.
Cool. And what's the one you're looking forward to as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the one I'm looking forward to is Blood and Truth. So one of the games that I didn't make my list at the start was PSVR Worlds, which is still an incredible game. But one of the particular mini games in it is London Heist, which many people have seen. It was basically what they sold PlayStation VR on launch, at least. And it was, I really loved it. I loved the reloading of the weapon every time you needed to. It just felt good, you know?
Yeah.
And at the time I was like, that was a brilliant experience that only lasted 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But if they made a full game of that, I'd be all over it. Well, they're making a full game of that, and I'm going to be all over it.
Well, I was lucky enough that I got to play Blood and Truth last year at Develop VR, and there's we made a list of 5 things, and I'll probably pick something else on my list, but this was top of my list, I have to say. Having played it, it's sensational, and it is literally like the London Heist taken to the nth degree. But they did say that they had slight different kind of a slight different influences in going for Blood and Truth. Basically, from what you've seen of the London Heist, it's much more kind of Snatch influenced, and that kind of Guy Ritchie type film. Blood and Truth is much more, Die Hard. It's much more kind of action movie orientated, and
so what you're saying is no Bricktop.
Yeah, basically, but then also it's more kind of balls to the wall, kind of all out, blowing everything up. And the level that I played was in a casino, and they did have a lengthier demo of this that they showed at Paris Games Week, and I didn't get to do the bit that they showed beforehand that was kind of breaking into the building and a bit kind of more quiet and methodical, kind of working through the level type thing. But I got to play the more bombastic shooting everyone bit, basically. And you're setting C4 charges in the casino, you're shooting people, there's a bit where you're interrogating one of the kind of boss, not mob bosses, but the kind of underling type thing to him, and you're kind of interrogating him for information, and you can shoot him if you want to, or you can shoot past him and kind of threaten him with it, or you can just hold the gun in his face and hope that threatens him enough to kind of wheedle the information out of him.
And then accidentally shoot him, because you don't know how this works.
Shoot him, yeah. I tried to shoot him in the little finger just to see what that did, and there was a particular reaction to that, because there was different reactions to shooting him in the leg or the thing. I think I just missed his finger, and so it counted as like a warning shot type thing. But yeah, look, that is really interesting. That is definitely one of the top of my list of things to come, and with good reason, basically.
It looks really cool.
Yeah, it is really, really good looking. So yeah, that is a great one. Right, now, I'm going to talk... now, I'm going to give you a choice, gentlemen. Would you like me to talk about a game that I haven't talked about yet on BRB UK that I think both of you might like and might be available to both of you?
Yes.
Or do you want to talk about a game that I am never going to be able to talk about on BRB UK because Dan's head would literally explode?
The former.
Okay, I will have to return to VRFC, which was the one that will make Dan explode because it's VR and football in one, and I don't think he could take those two things occupying the same space at the same time. Exactly, that's possible. But that was interesting, and I'll come back to that in the future. But Blasters of the Universe is one that I'll mention. Again, it's a wave shooter, and there are an abundance of wave shooters. I'm going to stop you there.
Yep. If this doesn't have a serious amount of He-Man references, I'm going to be livid.
Right, it doesn't, but like literally the whole thing is set up. This whole setup is like there's an 80s arcade. There's a guy that runs the arcade that thinks he's like the big fucking cheese type thing, and is really good at games. So he thinks he's everything. He kind of gets I can't remember if he gets sucked into a machine or goes in, but like the Tron like thing, and he kind of sets up this whole universe within an arcade machine, basically. And then at some point and somewhere you get kind of drawn into it as well. And basically, he's a complete idiot. That's a polite way of putting it. But you really, it makes me really want to shoot him in the face, kind of thing. Basically, this is this is exactly as it was described to me. And I was like, huh? I need to see that. And then I was like, oh, okay. But it is a bullet hell wave shooter. So literally, you can only get shot if you get shot in the face. Like, as long as it can hit anywhere else, as long as you're avoiding getting shot in the face, you're okay. So you need to move your face around the screen to dodge all the bullets that's coming in, and then you've got waves of enemies that you're trying to shoot to kind of do that. And it's one of those things where I think this would appeal to you, Kev, just on the fact of I know how much you like Borderlands. And where Borderlands comes into this is, imagine, all the different combinations that can go together for a Borderlands weapon.
Continue.
Well, imagine if those combinations were broke out into component pieces and you could choose and pick and choose the component pieces to get a weapon that would have billions of different things. So I'm like, okay, I want explosive ammunition, and I want a sight that does this, and I want this kind of barrel that does that, and this that does that, and then I've got a completely different weapon to you, kind of thing. And you can literally tailor those weaponry for your style of play, basically. And yeah, I just think that is something that is inherently fun and is something that you would take to, basically.
My interest in this just went through the roof as a result of that one statement.
It's not the smoothest or the best implemented. It's not kind of as stylish as Super Hot, and it's not kind of as kind of smoothly done as other things. But just for what it's bringing to the table in terms of that gun customization, I think is something that you'll really take to. I also think you'll really like the humour as well. So
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not 100% sure it's available on Oculus. I have to say that, but I imagine it would be. I don't see why it wouldn't.
Well, we'll look into it.
And yeah, as Mr. Diarmuid has already told me blood and truth, and as the internet hates me playing Ace Combat 7, I'm gonna pick, and I could pick Windlands 2, but I'm going to pick Pixel Ripped 1989 because that's one I am so curious about and so interested in. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
I've been struggling this whole episode to not bring that up just on a random little segue.
But it's a game I'm so interested in because I've played Blood and Truth, I've played Ace Combat 7 on it, and I've played Windlands 2, and I know I'm going to like all three of them. I'm very, very curious about Pixel Ripped 1989 just to see how that plays.
For those who don't know what Pixel Ripped is,
yeah, it's a really weird game.
So you're in VR and you play a character you're a kid and you've got to go to school. And the idea is, while you're in school, you've got to also play this game to completion on your on your little like Game Boy.
Yeah, it's like a Game Boy style device, and it looks like kind of the black and white era kind of graphics, and you're doing like those kind of era games.
You're playing this like 8-bit platforming game in front of you on this device while looking around you and making sure you don't get caught in school. And you can your teacher can catch you and send you to the headmaster's office, and then you get in trouble and lose. And you've got to like, there's a thing where it's like, oh, you'll be on recess and you can play the game freely, but then suddenly the teachers turn up and they don't like games. So it's a really, really interesting concept that I think is going to be it's going to be unique.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's going to just ramp up my anxiety to a...
in a massive way, yeah.
But
it'll be like Fortnite Simulator in current schools.
I don't know if you heard, though, but basically it got played at PAX recently, and I think, was it PAX East, the one that was recent? I can't remember.
Yes, it was, yeah.
It was PAX East, I think, and that was really highly thought of in terms of... basically just people saying it looks really good and plays really well. So I'm really hopeful that that's the case. So yeah.
To be clear, if anyone wants to go and check out the trailer for this, it's a great trailer.
Yes,
you will immediately think, wow, this looks like someone in the 80s made something in their basement and it sounds awful. And it is. It's awful quality trailer. Yeah. But that's kind of the theme of the whole thing.
That is the idea. So yeah.
And if you don't get that humour, then you probably aren't interested in the game.
That is true. But yeah, as I said, that's one I'm really curious and looking forward to seeing how that comes out, basically. But yeah, anyway, we are very long for time there, Mr. Kev. So do you want to tie us up and get us out of here?
There. So that was our first episode of Peripheral Vision. I think that went quite well. We didn't get through half of what we wanted to. But in future episodes, we'll be back talking a lot more focused on what we've been playing recently. We won't have to go through what headsets we own and what our top 5 games at the moment are. We want to try...
I think it was a good introductory kind of thing to bring everyone up to speed, though.
Yeah, it gets everyone an idea of like where we stand versus where you as the listener may stand in terms of certain things. And that's really all we can do. Is like the best part of doing this particular podcast is going to be the interaction with people who are also trying to come up in VR, and we can go back and forth, and it'll be a good little community thing.
Yeah, as I said, we definitely want to get more people involved with this, so please do what you can. Like, either contact us on Twitter through BigRedBarel, or myself at BRB Tim. Kev, what's your at Krelith?
Indeed.
Yeah? And Diarmuid, you
at Diarmuid_S.
At Diarmuid_S. So hit us up on those things. Come on the forums. We've got the Discord that you can jump on and kind of yell at us about, and I think we'll make a separate topic for VR at some point, possibly. But we'd also like some general feedback on the show. So let us know what you think. As
what would you want is an important thing.
What do you want will be a good thing. This is slightly different than we'll structure it going forward. But as we said, this was a good introductory thing to get everyone up to speed. But let us know what you'd like to see from us or what you'd like to hear from us in future regarding VR, and we'll kind of adapt our plans accordingly.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, until next time then, I shall bid you adieu.
Can I just say how nice it is to be able to talk VR without someone going, "Can you shut up about VR now, Tim?" So, thanks, guys. That was good.
Thank you very much.
See ya.
And your ears are quite welcome
for the podcasting goodness that you just heard.
Why not roll on over
to BigRedBarel.com
for more podcasts,
news, reviews, and videos from the biggest, reddest site on the internet, BigRedBarel.com.